how do we define corporate social responsibility? So, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development has defined corporate social responsibility as the continuing commitment by business to behave ethically and contribute to economic development while improving the quality of life of the workforce and their families, as well as of the local community and society at large. Now, let me caution you that in our country, as far as corporate social responsibility and its regulatory provisions are concerned, it is covered under Companies Act 2013 under Section 135, and it excludes all activities related to social welfare of the employees. Okay, so while the World Business Council for Sustainable Development definition talks about the workforce, our definition, our description of CSR excludes any expenditure, any program meant for the employees within the organization. Now, you may ask the question as to what is World Business Council for Sustainable Development and how it is a stakeholder in the corporate social responsibility process. So, let me just share with you that basically this is a CEO-led entity. It is an organization consisting of 200 members, and these are the different corporates across the world representing more than 60 countries. They have a global partnership. They have a network consisting of 60 plus network partners, and they contribute to the social responsibility and sustainable development projects. So, therefore, they are an important stakeholder in the corporate social responsibility aspect of the business. As I mentioned to you earlier, the idea of CSR is to do good for society. And we all know that all corporate entities, whether in the government sector or in the private sector, they would take then you have the funding organizations, and you have the larger environment as well. So the idea is that, you know, all corporate entities should do good for the employees as well as the different stakeholders. So that is the basic concept of corporate social responsibility. Since we derive our resources from different stakeholders, including the environment, therefore we have a responsibility to give back to them and ensure that environmental sustainability is maintained. But then, you see, there is another side of corporate performance. And the reality is that even when we talk about the COVID scenario that we are currently in, when the COVID began, at that point of time, most of the countries did not have their local supplies of the PPE and the ventilators. And so the manufacturers were mainly coming from China and some of the developed nations. And people and scientists in Africa and some of the Latin American countries were told that they cannot supply to them because most of the supply was already booked by America, that is United States of America or Europe. And at the same time, the other phenomena was that there was a steep hike in the prices of the vital things. In fact, even in our own country, we had seen how the price of the mask and the price of the sanitizers increased the moment the government asked the citizens to make use of the mask and the sanitizers. So corporates are still led by the economic motive, and yes, to some extent, they fulfill the social obligation, but there is still a gap in terms of the resources that they get from the society and the benefits that they willingly give to the society. In fact, talking about the corporate and their conduct, if you remember, to some of you, last semester I taught the course of International Business Environment, and I emphasized on LPG, that is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. But we have seen in the COVID time as to how, the ideological myth of the virtues of liberalization, privatization, and globalization has being questioned by the way that many of the companies have performed their business. So, what are the three ideological statements? So, the statements are: number one, that liberalization is good, which means that unregulated markets are best at managing the supply and demand. And I just now mentioned to you how it is not true. Now, coming to privatization, one of the belief is that private sector is best at innovation, and much of the research development and innovation comes from the triad market consisting of United States of America, Europe, Japan. But that myth is also challenged, and we'll see how. And the third thing is globalization. And with the emergence of World Trade Organization in 1995, there was a belief that globalization is going to usher in a state of welfare for all the people across different nations. But all of that has not really happened. Now, talking about the private sector and how it has contributed to innovation, we can see that, when we talk about vaccination, which is supposed to be the panacea for dealing with this pandemic, much of the financial support comes from the governments, and they are the ones who are buying out from the corporate entity using the taxpayer money. So if you look at United States of America also, they have given enough financial support to Moderna, in fact, to the tune of 2.5 billion US dollar to develop the vaccine, and also to buy the doses from Moderna. Similarly, if you look at the case of Russia and China, which is primarily state or the public sector driven economy, we have seen that whether it is Russia's institute or whether it is China's Sinopharm company, they were successful in developing effective vaccines, and in case of China, they were the first one to enter with the vaccine. Also, we saw in 2020 the dark side of the fact that unregulated markets are best at managing supply and demand. I mentioned to you that some of the African and Latin American countries were left without any support in terms of the vital essentials of PPE, ventilator, mask, and sanitizer. And the demand came from all the nations, but when you look at the supply side, the developed nations which had higher economic power, they were able to save more life comparatively. You see, we saw how Italy and Spain had major share of fatalities and severity of the impact, which was followed by United States of America, Germany, and UK, and of course India. But right now we are talking about the wealthy few. Okay, so they also underwent a lot of misery out of this pandemic, but at the same time, because they had money, so they could get access to best of the supplies and the facilities. And we are again finding that there is undersupply of vaccines. Of course, government of India has reached out to many of the developing nations and giving them support in the form of supply of vaccines, but we can still find that the countries like Israel, they have been able to, have a major drive of vaccination, and they have almost covered the country by paying higher prices. And US is also trying to do the same thing. So they are willing to pay higher, and they have the capability and the capacity to pay higher to get the quick access to the vaccine. In Europe, I mean, we talk about European Union and how it is empathetic and how it is more committed to social welfare. But there also we saw how United Kingdom has managed to secure more vaccine for themselves as compared to some of the other nations. It's a different story altogether, and about which we will talk later as to how UK is no longer a part of the European unit. So we talked about liberalization, we talked about privatization, and when we are talking about the unregulated market, World Health Organization is calling this phenomena of a few wealthy nation having access to the vaccine as vaccine nationalism, but actually it is vaccine capitalism, because those with higher level of capital formation have access to vaccine. In fact, if you look at United States, it has already got 1.5 billion, multiple times higher than the number of people that they have. Similar is the case with European Union, which has more than 2 billion doses of the vaccine, and this is enough to vaccinate all of their citizens. India, which is a supplier and a producer, may not be able to get the target of universal vaccination for a long time to come. And same is the case with many of the other poor nations. And as per one of the estimate, they might have to wait till 2024, and we do not know how many waves of the coronavirus pandemic would be there by that time. So these are difficult times, and unfortunately, in spite of all the talks about corporate social responsibility, when you look at the outcome in terms of globalization, all is not well. WHO Director General Tedros called this state as a catastrophic moral failure. But of course, this is also one of the global economic disaster incoming, because if there isn't a uniform vaccine rollout, and if we continue to have international trade, if we continue to have transportation and the intermingling of people, everyone is going to have an adverse impact. So I would like to get some feedback from you whether all that we have been discussing in terms of the virtues and sorry, the moral dilemma associated with you know the crony capitalism, as we call it, um, What is your take on this? What do you believe is the way out, or is there a way out, or we will continue the way it is? You can also mention on chat your comments and your suggestion, and you can also unmute yourself and answer if you would like to do that. No one is willing to share anything. So I believe then we can move ahead and move to the next part where we will talk about the reality a bit more. So this was a specific case of the COVID pandemic and how world is responding to it, and how multinational enterprises are gaining out of this situation in terms of the government support coming in the form of different kind of subsidies, as well as the price that they would be getting for the vaccine rollout. But then, if you look at the historical development, the corporate history, you will find that there are innumerable accounting scandals. And in India, we had the accounting scandal of Satyam. In US, we had the major case of Enron. And talking about Enron, please note it down. Please mark it. The next assignment for you is to watch a particular movie. Please note down the name of the movie. The name of the movie is The Smartest Guys in the Room. Is it clear? Okay. The name of the movie is The Smartest Guys in the Room. So you have to watch this movie after the class is over. Based on the movie, you will have to do some exercise which will be part of your evaluation. You all know that 40 marks are reserved for internal assessment. Internal assessment will be continuous evaluation in which you will have a test along with some of the other activities. Yeah. So coming back to the accounting scandals, so in case of Enron, they were able to project higher profitability figures, and ultimately, beyond the point, they could not conceal their failure, and the market got a whiff of it, and the market crashed. The company declared itself to be bankrupt, and the stakeholder suffered a lot. We had a similar situation in Satyam where the owner, Mr. Raju, tried to divert the fund, tried to create what you call as fraudulent transactions and fraudulent reporting of the profits. And after a certain point of time, agreed, admitted that they were doing some malpractice of accounting fraud. So Satyam case is also rather old
Ma'am,
now.
also
Yes.
Axis Bank did a very similar case. So, for example, they were offering loans to people. Uh, so, if people used to buy a house, that house was particularly allotted. The loan towards that house was allotted by two people. So, they were sanctioning loan to two people. So, that is also one of the case.
I'm not very sure whether that happened or not. If you
Ma'am,
can
that
share
did.
some more information with me, I will be happy. But right now, this is an information which has come from you, and I do not have any other mechanism to verify it at this point of time. Of course, whether it is ICICI Bank, and we know what Chanda Kochar did, and how the money was diverted to the account of Videocon group. So there are many cases. There are some contemporary case, and you may be right, but I will have to verify whether this was the case, because if that is happening, then that is a more serious problem. We already know about the price fixing scandals. So if you just follow any of the industry, where there is a situation of oligopoly, you'll find that the price, moves in a particular band, and most of the players they try to have a similar range of the price, and we can see it in the case of detergent market where Procter and Gamble and Unilever and Henkel they all have their prices in a range. And of course, I think last semester I asked you to go through the videotape of Radia Gate. Am I right? So anyway, if you have not done that, I will again share it with you. And we all know about the case of Miss Radia and how she, along with some of the other journalists and some of the corporate players, tried to rig the government system, tried to fix up as to who will be the minister in the government and what kind of portfolio they will have, so that when telecom 2G spectrum rollout, 3G spectrum rollout will take place, they are in a position to have, the conditions rolled out for them. So this was again another case of corruption. Of course, we have a history of corruption. I think there was a movie recently which focused on the Harshad Mehta case. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie. Can you help me? Can you mention it on the chat box, or can you unmute and tell me the name of the movie? There was a movie which dealt with the Harshad Mehta case very recently, and it has been very popular. It's a TV serial, I believe.
Yes, ma'am. Scam 1991.
1992.
What is
Scam
the name?
1991.
Scam 1992.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. I'm yet to watch that movie, but I have been told that this series is actually, uh, interesting one, and actually opens up all the secrets of the wrongdoing at the stock market in that era. So, can someone, verify? How many of you have seen it? Can you just enter your names in the chat box so that I will get some idea whether people are actually watching this program or not? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. We can hear you. Actually, I have not seen that movie.
Okay, okay. And Aisha also says that she has not seen that series. So much is happening on OTT, and many times we are not able to keep pace with it. Anyway, so we were talking about the reality of corporates and how, one after other we have seen so many scandals. So before that, we had one scandal called Nagarwala scandal, and you can just Google and find out. And next time we will talk about it. So whether it is Harshad Mehta scandal, whether it is 2G and Radia Gate, whether it is the ICICI Bank case, or whether it is the Nirav Modi and who are the other ones? Can you identify? Can you help me out? Who are the other responders? Kingfisher
Mehul
Tycoon?
Chok-
Yes, Mehul
Mehul
Choksi.
Choksi, ma'am.
Yes, Geetanjali's Mehul Choksi and Kingfishers.
Lalit Modi also, ma'am.
Lalit Modi also. And who else? The Karnataka guy who is in UK. The Kingfisher owner. Who is the person?
Vijay Mallya.
Yes, yes. Okay. So we have seen so many instances. And then, these are still, scandals which affect probably, some part of the economy. But then environmental disasters don't differentiate between the have nots and those who have the money. So we have cases of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, where BP was involved. Then we have Exxon Valdez oil spill in Prince William Sound, Alaska. That happened in March 1989. And we have seen the case of suicide of Siddhartha of Cafe Coffee Day chain. And some people believe that he also committed suicide because he could not, go through the, manipulation of the accounting reports anymore. And some people allege that there was some kind of coercion on the part of the taxation authority, and that is another side of the problem. So corporate India sometimes gives this argument that the whole system is corrupt, and in order to survive, we have to make many compromises, and that is how we have to indulge into some or the other unfair means when it comes to doing business. Okay, so this is about the practice side, and now let us shift our focus to what you call as the theory part. Okay, or if you want, we will continue with the practice side, and we'll talk about the regulation, the Companies Act 2013 and Section 135, and how corporate social responsibility is regulated. So can you quickly mention on the chat box whether you want me to go to theory or you want me to go to the regulation part? So let me have a quick take, whether you want regulation or whether you want the theory. Let me see how many people mention it on the chat box. Regulation. Shruti says regulation. Let's switch over to regulations. And anybody else who has a difference of opinion? Sheena wants theory, Preeti wants regulation. Okay, so out of the three, we have two for regulation. And yes, that is an interesting question coming from Mr. Ram Ratan Paswan as to what is the difference. So theory is about some of the academicians like us, what they have to talk about corporate social responsibility, its genesis, its manifestation and action. And when you talk about the regulation, it is about the corporate India's legal framework for exercising the corporate social responsibility. Okay, is it clear? So I am finding that the situation is 50-50 in favor of regulation and theory. So I think ultimately I will have to take a call. And okay, so let us just follow the sequence in which I had actually planned it. So one of the major theoretical contribution comes from Carroll, who has talked about corporate social responsibility pyramid. And according to him, the corporates have different levels of responsibility, beginning with economic responsibility, which means that every corporate entity must, through its programs and product, generate profit, and this profit will help the company to go further. But beyond earning the profit, they should also ensure that they abide by all the rules, regulation, and the legislative framework in a given nation and all the nations in which they are conducting their business. When it comes to legal things, there are certain things which are defined as per the law. But then there are what you call as our moral values and norms. And sometimes they are not captured by the legal system. The next level of responsibility that the corporate must exercise is that they should move beyond legal fulfillment of their obligation and do what is morally right. For example, it is not morally right to produce tobacco, because there are various medical studies to prove that consumption of tobacco can lead to lung cancer and some other ailments. But the law does not prohibit the production and marketing of tobacco products. Okay, so an ethical company has to move beyond the legal provision and do something which is right for the society. And finally, you have what you call as philanthropic responsibility, which is beyond all of these. We talked about the stakeholder analysis, how every business will have different stakeholders, consumers, suppliers, society, government agencies, funding institution, and how we need to do things so that we are in the good books of all of these. But then, even if some of the constituent of the society are not our stakeholder, if we do something that is going to benefit them, we are going beyond economic, legal, and ethical responsibility and entering philanthropy. Okay, so this is the premise of Carroll, and this is how he tries to define what companies should do in order to be known as a socially responsible corporate entity. This is also about corporate citizenship, corporate sustainability. So these are the different terms that we use interchangeably. But Carroll's theory is one of the most widely quoted theory. So if you have a question paper which is more oriented towards theory, or if you have a question paper which will be a mix of theory and practice, then there is a possibility that the question may be asked about Carroll's theoretical contribution to corporate social responsibility study. So again, coming back to the Carroll's pyramid, the first responsibility is to make money. And why? Because if the companies will not make profit, they are doomed to perish. And most of the case, if you are not earning profit, then you are more susceptible to actually not adhere to the moral principles, and therefore it makes all sense to adhere to economic responsibility of earning profit. The next is to adhere to rules and regulation. And of course, there isn't much controversy about the legal responsibility of the business. So legal responsibility is what we call as the proactive duty of the corporate. All responsible organizations should accept the rules, and not just in letter but also in the spirit of the limit. So you may have a driver who stays under the speed limit because he cannot afford a traffic ticket, I mean the challan, and then there could be one who actually follows the speed limit because he believes that this is the right way to drive so that nobody is adversely affected. So if a celebrity like John Travolta, can anyone tell me what is John Travolta known for? Can you mention on the chat box? Can anyone mention? What is he known for and which era did he represent as a celebrity? John Travolta. No one? Can you Google out and mention? Please Google out and mention. Mention in the chat box or answer by unmuting. Who is John Travolta? I'm still waiting for the answer. Yes, you are right. Actor and singer. Okay. So one of the celebrity, and the reason why the reference is coming, that we expect everyone to fulfill their responsibility, whether it is the corporate entity or the celebrity. Then comes the ethical responsibility. Okay, and this is another example where there is a driver driving in the Porsche or maybe Mercedes or maybe a Land Rover, and there is another driver on the road with a flat tire. So there is a social obligation to stop and help him, but there is no legal mandate to do so. So when it comes to the corporate entity, a good corporate culture means that the business will find itself or act itself as a responsible citizen of the society, and whatever is mandated by any citizen in terms of his duties, that has to be done by the corporate also. And this is not just limited to rules, regulation, but also adherence to the right practice. So again, coming to philanthropy, we have an example of an industrial chemical company. We just now saw the example of Robert Bosch, where they tried to rehabilitate the lake for the benefit of the society. So although they are into different businesses, they are into automotive electronics, they are into consumer electronics, and they are into different kind of research and development, and they are also into some of the other things which go into different products, so some components and machines. So they are into different things, but even if they would not take up this project of rehabilitation of the Madiwala Lake, do you think it would make any difference? No, it wouldn't. But as a philanthropist, the company is right in taking up such a project. We all know about Warren Buffett. We all know about the Bill Gates and his NGOs. We all know about the Facebook CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, and how he is contributing to the education of children, education of women, and there are so many other philanthropic projects going ahead. In India, who are some of the leading, donors as far as philanthropy goes? Can anyone answer this question? Name some of the leading philanthropists from India. I will give you one name.
Azim Premji, madam.
Okay. Anybody else?
Azim Prem.
Ratan Tata.
Okay.
Azim Premji, madam.
Yes, that's right, Mr. Naveen.
Ratan Tata.
That's right, Dipanshu. Anybody else that you can think of? Do you think Ambani's and Adanis? Do you think Ambani's and Adanis don't do any philanthropy?
Madam is he may be doing, but his image is more like a businessman. His
Yes.
he is more oriented towards doing those activities which ultimately earn him money. Like he has opened some. Yeah.
So I give you an assignment to all of you. The second assignment. The first one is clear. You have to watch the movie, The Smartest Guys, and the second assignment is please do a due diligence, find out about Reliance Foundation and some of the philanthropy work that they do. Okay? Is it clear?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So we will talk about these two next time. Yeah, so we were talking about philanthropy and how it is the fourth pillar of the CSR as per Carroll's theoretical framework. Now let's talk about the Companies Act 2013, Section 135. Let me caution you here that very recently we have come across some modifications in the rules related to the CSR section 135. I'm sorry, I got disconnected. There was some internet issue. Okay, so am I audible now? Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You're audible, but screen is not visible.
Okay, so I will have to again present it to you, I believe, because I lost the connectivity. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I was actually asking a question. How many of you have worked for Tata Group? Hello?
Yes, madam. I think many of the guys are working with Tata Electric.
Yes, yes. Okay. So those of you who are part of Tata Group, you might be knowing that way back in 1905, 1904, Tatas had set up Tisco. And not only had they set up Tisco, the industrial unit, they had also created the entire township and ensured that all their employees get all the benefits of civic life. So whether it is sanitation, electricity, education for children, health and hospitality, health and hospitals, everything was created by the Tatas for their employees. So if you talk about the India's struggle for freedom, you would find that industrialists like Mr. Bajaj and others, they helped the Indian National Congress in many ways. Similarly, we have the tradition of the kings, creating the shelter for the travelers and you know the so-called Seth Sahukar, creating the Dharamshala. So doing good for the society is part and parcel of our heritage, our culture, and our lifestyle. But still, the government of India, and mind it, we were one of the very few governments which actually made it compulsory, made it mandatory for a class of the companies to spend a part of their profit for social welfare of the different stakeholders. So in 2013, we came up with the new Companies Act, and the Companies Act actually made it mandatory as per Section 135 of Companies Act 2013 for any company, if it is having a net worth of 500 crore or more, if it is having a turnover of 1000 rupees, 1000 crore rupees or more, or a net profit of rupees 5 crore or more, to do activities for the social benefit of the different constituents of the society. They were mandated to create a CSR committee consisting of 3 or more directors, out of which at least one of the directors had to be an independent director, and they had to formulate the CSR policy, identify the plan of activities, identify the budget allocation, and implement the program, and also make disclosure in the board report, also ensure that it is reflected in the annual account of the companies. So this was a major change which came up in 2013. So the CSR committee had to recommend the policy to the board. There is reference to Schedule 7, but of course, I will tell you later as to what has been some major amendment to this particular provision. And so basically, the disclosure had to be made in annual report and the website, and the preference was to be given to local community and the area. And again, this is something that has undergone a change with the new rule that has come up. So this is CSR regulatory framework, and we now have the CSR policy amendment rules 2021, and some of the provisions of the earlier Companies Act Section 135 provisions have undergone changes on account of this. But first, let us see what was the original position. Okay, so the original position is that in case you fall under any of these three categories, that is, if you have net worth of rupees 500 crore or more, if you have turnover of rupees 1000 crore or more, if you have a net profit of rupees 5 crore or more, then you have to spend at least 2% of the average net profit made during the preceding 3 financial year on corporate social activities. In case you are not able to disclose in the annual report, then the company had to actually give explanation for failure to do so. But what actually happened was that the government found that due to this provision, there are many cases of companies which were not willingly spending money on social responsibility and not reflecting it. And therefore, there was a suggestion that, there should be some kind of but eventually it was not something that was resorted to. But of course, there were many cases, filed by the different enforcement agencies. But finally, the penalty was not imposed. Of course, they had also defined as to what constitute a CSR activity. So some of the activities which they defined in the Schedule 7 of the section are eradication of hunger and poverty, promotion of education, gender equality, empowerment of women, ensuring that the health benefits accrued to all children mortality is reduced, and the maternal health of women is taken care of, and some of the vector diseases such as malaria and other are addressed in a way that we are able to reduce the incidence of disease. Corporates have to ensure environmental sustainability, and environmental projects which actually reduce the carbon emissions had to be undertaken. Similarly, employment enhancing vocational skill activities had to be undertaken, and now, of course, the setting up of the incubation along with IITs is also one of the activity which has been permitted as part of the social responsibility of the company. We saw in the case of COVID as to how many of the corporate entities contributed to Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. So contribution to Prime Minister's National Relief Fund or any such fund which is set up by the central government or the state government for the socio-economic development and relief and welfare of the marginalized section of our economy, such as the scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, and OBCs, minorities, women. So they are all part and parcel of Schedule 7. Similarly, there is a provision that if you want to restore the heritage buildings and the monuments in our country, that would also be part of the CSR activities. But you see, one of the major concern that we have is that why corporate social responsibility should not be integral to the corporate strategy of the company. I think the range of the activities which have been given by Government of India through the regulation is so wide that it can be an integral part of the business policy and the strategy of an organization. Why should it be an additional burden or cost to the company? So this is one of the major question that is being debated in various, uh, committees and various seminars. Ultimately, you see, when it comes to the benefits of corporate social responsibility, what are the benefits? You have a better corporate reputation, you strengthen the corporate relationship with public, with society. There is reduction in terms of risk arising out of your, you know, inadvertent errors and omissions, and you get the opportunity for cause marketing. So there are advantages, and of course, with most of the funding agencies and in the international investors now linking the social responsibility and ethical governance to dispersal of the money, it has become equally, rather, it has become so important and pertinent for the corporate entities to get themselves involved into social responsibility activities. So this is just to give you some broad idea of the regulation as it started way back in 2013. Now let us talk about some of the major changes which have happened, looking at the way the scheme has evolved and functioned over a period of time. Now, I think what I will do is I will stop at this point of time, and